Let's talk about some socialism. Let's talk about Bernie Sanders and his version of socialism. He says he's not a socialist. Bernie Sanders is a democratic socialist. So there's a distinction between what Bernie Sanders' socialism is and from the common definition or the radical definition. Merriam-Webster, they define socialism as any various economic or political theories advocating collective or government ownership and administration of the means of production and the distribution of goods. A lot of times people use socialism as government spending, which is just a welfare state that's not, socialism. Socialism is a theory, and it advocates collective or government ownership and administration of the means of production and the distribution of goods. Means of production, that's how you make stuff. Distribution of goods, how you pass the stuff that you make out. So either the government's doing that or you got some collective that's doing it. Okay, so that's socialism according to Merriam-Webster. Now let's talk. Bernie Sanders in 1972, he ran as a Liberty Union Party member, I think for senator of Vermont, I don't know. But in 72, Bernie Sanders is going to run for office. Not a Democrat, not a Republican, but as a Liberty Union member. And he had said, and he was quoted as saying, Richard Nixon represented millionaires and billionaires and propped up the 2% that owns 1/3 of the wealth in America. So, that's some consistency, isn't it? 50 years ago, Bernie Sanders was ripping on the millionaires and billionaires, saying Richard Nixon represented the millionaire and billionaire class, and that he propped up the 2% that owns 1/3 of all the wealth in America. Now it's 1% that owns 1/3 of America. It's still, essentially the inequality is worse now. But that just goes to show you that Bernie Sanders has been right his entire life. He doesn't triangulate, he doesn't evolve, he just has been right from the very beginning. Okay, so Donald Trump, if you think of socialism as spending by the government, then he's a corporate socialist. We got $22 trillion in debt. Somebody's getting paid. Corporate farmers got $16 billion in aid. Israel gets $4 billion. Big bank bailout was $700 billion. Military budget, $730 billion. So for these U.S. leaders spending trillions and trillions of dollars claiming that they're not socialist, well, they're certainly spending a ton of our taxes on something. Now, the big bank bailout, that's probably the clearest version of socialism. That's a handout, a government handout. Government paid the banks $700 billion because they fucked up the economy. And then people bitch about reparations, which is a little bit less than $700 billion. It's $500 billion. But shouldn't we bail out black people? Black people got, fucked over, but the banks are going to get the bailouts, but none of the people are going to get the bailouts. Baby Bush, he said that when he passed that big bank bailout, he used socialism in order to save capitalism. Sometimes you got to abandon free market principles in order to save the free market system. What? No, capitalism says if you're a bank that fucks people over and then people don't like you and they pull all their money out, you go under, you go down, you drown. And then some other corporation that's actually responsible to their, consumers, they rise. A small business goes out of business, they don't get a bailout. They go out of business, they're done. That's capitalism, right? C'est la vie, market forces, supply and demand. But some reason when the banks, right, they're too big to fail. They're too big to fail. Bernie's going to break up these fucking banks, which he should do. Fuck monopolies. If you play Monopoly, the person who gets a Monopoly win, but you know who never loses? The bank. The bank always has all the money, and they never lose. They never lose. The bank never loses in Monopoly. Okay, so trillions of fucking dollars. Okay, you're not a socialist, right, Mitch McConnell? Trillions of dollars. What do you spend trillions of dollars, Mitch? Mitch McConnell wants to say the McCarthyism of, him being Moscow Mitch. I'm sick of the McCarthyism. He's Mr. McCarthyite. He's Mr. Obama's a socialist. That's socialism. That's socialism. Is this socialism? What's socialism? He's been Mr. fucking McCarthy with his anti-fucking socialist bullshit. What a fucking crybaby. He is such a piece of shit. Somebody got under his skin, and good fucking crybaby asshole. God damn. Mitch McConnell is proof positive that the American system of democracy sucks. It doesn't work. Incumbents get right back in there 95% of the time. The Senate's an elitist institution. We should abolish the Senate. Why do we even have the Senate? It should be, proportional representation. We're going to protect the state. the state is just more important than the people. No, the people are more important than the state. And the people are more important than the capital. When it comes to capital and labor, Abraham Lincoln says that he sides with labor. So do I. He also says he's not a master nor a slave. So am I. Abraham Lincoln was a badass. He brought about the Second American Revolution. So don't talk no shit about no Abraham Lincoln to me. Okay, so, socialism. Donald Trump is a corporate socialist. When it comes to government spending, if that's what we're talking about, whether it's government spending, right? $22 trillion, he's added $5 trillion onto the debt. God damn. Donald Trump, why are you being such a big-ass socialist? Just giving free money, not to the small farmers, but to big corporate farms because you fucked them over with your trade battles. Israel's getting $4 billion. These corporate farms get $16 billion. How's that not socialism? Hey, corporate farmers, here's a check. Hey, big banks, here's a check. Hey, Israel, here's a check. Hey, American people, you get no checks. We're going to cut Social Security. We're not going to pass UBI. Okay. So, if we're going to talk about socialism, I think I'll just use Merriam-Webster's as sort of the baseline for what socialism is. I guess socialism is many things to many people, so if we really want to have an honest conversation, we got to define our words the exact same. If we're using words with different definitions, then we're not actually having a conversation. So, we're going to go with this one. Socialism is any various economic or political theories advocating collective or government ownership and administration of the means of production and the distribution of goods. So some people say that that's for the working class people because the government represents the working class, and so when the government owns something, then therefore the working class people own something. But that's assuming that you actually have a democracy that functions and a government that actually operates based upon what the people want. So I like the idea of collective ownership and administration because collective ownership says that we own it all together, and also like it being voluntary association. So we can have socialist groups which everybody is, voluntarily joins up with it, and then the working class could control the factories and the means of production that way. Government ownership, it's not always clear to me that government is a tool for the working class. Government is a tool, but it could be a tool for the corporate class against the working class people. So that's So that's the definition of socialism right there, right? It's either collective or government ownership and administration of the means of production and the distribution of goods. There's a saying, and this might help. Communism forgets the individual. Capitalism forgets the community. Capitalism forgets the community. And then communism forgets the individual. So communism wants to care about everybody. Everybody gets fed. Everybody's doing okay. So communism is good about, caring about everybody. But it's bad when it comes to individual freedoms and rights and the capitalists and the innovators and the people that want to, do something for themselves. So I think we should do both. We should protect the individual and we should protect the community. And so there's another thing that says, if I give a man a sandwich, I'm a hero, but if I say that the poor need to be fed, they call me a communist. So there is some things that essentially if it's going to help people are going to, that's communism. That helps people. I'd rather spend $22 trillion on a system that doesn't help anybody. That's how I roll. That's the kind of socialist I am. $22 trillion for a system that helps nobody. Okay, fantastic. Versus what? Having universal health care. So let's kill kids at the border, kill Palestinians, invade Venezuela. Unlimited money for all that. Right? Okay, so the means of production, those are the factories, okay? So the capitalist is because there's capital, and capital is your assets, your buildings, your houses, your factories, your objects, your things, your machines that make things. And that's the means of production. So it's the machines that make things, and then buildings. So the buildings that those machines are in, that produce the GDP. So the means that produce GDP. Mostly capitalists own the means of production, and then the general public, the proletariat, is labor. They got to pimp themselves out as cheap labor in order to survive. So that's, because of that setup, you have capitalists and you have labor, the proletariat. But you also have some people that own stuff and they're workers too. So I just wanted to explain the means of production is just the means that produce stuff. So the machines and the factories that produce GDP, that's the means of production. And socialism to me is when the working class own the means of production. So that means we own the factories and we own the stuff that makes stuff, so that way we can actually govern it instead of just making 100 cars and letting General Motors profit as much as possible. What if you sold most of them and then had the other 10 passed out to deserving people that, needed it but couldn't afford it? That would be better for the community. So they're still making their money, and then people are still being helped. So we're caring about the individual, we're caring about the community, we're thinking with our minds, we're feeling with our hearts. We're being nice and balanced, right? We're not just being one-sided psychopathic pieces of shit. A bunch of selfish assholes. So government or collective ownership. I like the idea of collective ownership. Voluntary association collective ownership, not the government. The government, I guess I question the government, because if the government owns, let's say, healthcare, okay? Now, let's say the oil industry. The government takes over the oil industry. Are they going to run the oil companies, as good as they've been running themselves? They've been making record profits, so, that's saying that they're doing okay for themselves. So if the government starts running it, will they be as profitable? Will they be as efficient? And then will they make sure that the money that they make actually gets to the working class people? The government could take over the oil industry, and then the oil industry could get in the government, and it doesn't even help the working class people. When I think about the Soviet Union, that's a union of Soviets. That's how I think of socialism. So the Soviet Union, there was the gulags and the authoritarianism, but if you just think of the terms Soviet Union, so a Soviet is a working class union, and then the Soviet Union is all those working class unions joining a bigger union. So Soviet Union is redundant. It's union. Now, Russia has been organizing themselves in working class unions, since Lenin and Trotsky. So they've been organizing these Soviets for quite some time. The Soviets, I think, are very revolutionary. There's lots of ways you can, look at a unit of, a person or an organization of people. So when you think about the people of America, do you think of them as all individuals? Economists think of households. So each household, carries, it's a household. So, but I also think that working class unions, that would be very beneficial. That'd be smart. We live in a capitalist society, so we need to get jobs. We need to organize ourselves. So not just unionizing an industry, but just having a union. If that industry goes out, then we're still a collection of people that's going to, move forward and do something different. We're going to have to evolve and change. So that's a Soviet, a voluntary association, a working class union. And the Russians have been organizing themselves in these Soviets for quite some time. It makes more sense. The family is a powerful unit, but it also makes sense for families to organize with other families in order to be a part of a Soviet, be part of a working class union. We got to get jobs, we got to start companies, so we got to succeed in this world, and you may need somebody. So working class unions. I like the idea of Soviet socialism. It's important in understanding that the workers now control the factories and the farm workers control the farms. So slaves on a plantation, kick those lazy slave-owning pieces of shit out, and then let these slaves run the plantation. Of course they can run the plantation. What, you need a lazy minority to tell everybody what to do? No, you don't. I mean, if that's what you need, then I'm sure, one of the slaves can volunteer for that position. Or you could elect a position if you think, well, we need leadership. Or you could just have, a radical democratic group that's essentially free to do as they please, and then they get together with the most important issues that's confronting them. So the slaves can run the plantations. We could run the plantations ourselves. And the farm workers could control the farms, the factory workers could control the factories. We could do it ourselves. We the people, through our working class unions, will then run things around here. Not just some rich asshole, not just some person part of the plutocracy, some, Kennedy or some dynasty that's been running shit. Well, let's just give it to them. They've been running shit, so let's just let them run shit. So Bernie Sanders and socialism. Bernie Sanders is essentially a New Deal Democrat. He's a New Deal Democrat, and I think he's going to run to the right of his previous social positions. So I believe that we can only expect him to be as great as FDR and nothing more. You hope for the best, you expect the worst. So the worst is he's only an FDR Democrat, and he's also going to protect the capitalist class. So he's going to save capitalism with his brand of democratic socialism. That's what FDR was. He was a liberal who saved capitalism. He was not a socialist. Now, Bernie Sanders, he really likes Eugene Debs. He listens to Eugene Debs' speeches. He's got a big portrait of Eugene Debs hanging up in his D.C. office. Eugene Debs is a 5-time presidential candidate of the Socialist Party of America back in the 1900s. So Eugene Debs gave a speech protesting World War I, and he was thrown in jail for 10 years just for speaking out against the war, which was bullshit. And there was a draft. Woodrow Wilson was a segregationist, racist piece of shit. Eugene Debs was right. World War I was bullshit, and it may have actually contributed to the rise of Germany in World War II. So, if you think about what Bernie Sanders is, he's to the right of Eugene Debs. He's to the right of all socialists, Che Guevara, Stalin, your most biggest. So, he's going to be to the right of Mao and Stalin. Che is a revolutionary, so he's a badass, but he's not, a guerrilla revolutionary. He's a political revolutionary. Bernie Sanders is. So he's going to be to the right of Che Guevara. He's going to be to the right of Mao and Stalin and Trotsky and Marx. He's probably going to be to the right of Marx. He's to the right of all the Green Party, Cynthia McKinney, Jill Stein, and Ralph Nader. And then Bernie Sanders is also to the right of the socialists in Congress with the Green New Deal. They're for the universal basic income. And he's not for the universal basic income. So he's actually to the right of AOC and, the few socialists in Congress, her Green New Deal. He's to the right of the Green New Deal. He's to the right of AOC. He's to the right of, all the extremists. But he's also to the right of Eugene Debs. And I think that gets you closer to where Bernie Sanders actually stands. He's to the left of Eisenhower and Nixon, which were liberal presidents, considering they're Republicans, but just barely. Nixon and Eisenhower are more representative of Bernie Sanders than they are of the Democrat or the Republicans of today. So Bernie Sanders is more of an Eisenhower. Bernie Sanders is more of a Nixon than the Republicans are. The Republicans are off the charts. The Democrats are the Republicans. And so, they are more liberal, but Bernie Sanders is to the left of them. So Bernie is to the left of Eisenhower, to the left of Nixon, but to the right of Eugene Debs. And he's to the right of FDR. He's a New Deal Democrat. So my expectations for him is to be as good as FDR was. Nothing more, but nothing less. So to rise up to the level of FDR-ness. Okay, FDR is going to pass an economic Bill of Rights. So look up FDR's Bill of Rights. Check out Eugene Debs' goals. Bernie Sanders says that the goals that Eugene Debs had for American democracy are the same goals that Bernie has. So look at Eugene Debs, look at FDR. Some people have mentioned Henry Wallace, Upton Sinclair. So, you can go ahead and compare and contrast how you want to, and you could say where he's, situated on the spectrum. But the political compass actually says that he's right here. So Bernie Sanders is right in the middle. He's a moderating voice. He's an Eisenhower Republican. So he's like slightly left and then slightly libertarian. So he's like a little libertarian and a little socialistic. Just a little bit. Whereas I'm all the way on the bottom corner. I'm with Jill Stein. We believe government should help the poor, but we think that government should stay out of our private lives. My freedom, I'm allowed to be as free as I want to be until it infringes upon other people's freedoms. And so, when it comes to the government, we need government to help the poor, but when it comes to, giving a fuck about, they should protect our freedoms. They could do that. That would be a good use for government, but they shouldn't be infringing upon our freedoms. So when it comes to, the war on drugs, prostitution, gay marriage, what rights do they have to tell me, what I can and can't do with my own body? You're the fucking government. Fuck you. So I'm a left libertarian. So Bernie Sanders. His brand of socialism, he says it's democratic socialism. For 5 decades, he's claimed to be a democratic socialist. So Bernie Sanders has a long record. You want to know what his brand of democratic socialism is? Look at the things he's passed. Look at his speeches. Look at his entire life. Look how he ran Burlington, Vermont. He was a mayor. So whatever Bernie has done in the past is what defines Bernie Sanders' democratic socialism. Now, some appalling statistics, 47% of Americans said that they would vote for a socialist, which is lower than for a Muslim or an atheist. So, Americans are more likely to vote for an atheist or a Muslim more than they're ready to vote for a socialist. So for right now, right, he doesn't seem like he's going to be a good contender, but the Democrats back Bernie Sanders, then he'll have the Democratic machine, and then he'll look like a superstar. That'll change, and it's 47%, so that's almost the majority. But they said, only 47% ever said that they would vote for it. That means 53% is like, no, I will never vote for an atheist. I will never vote for a Muslim. And I never, ever, will I ever vote for a socialist. I will never vote for a socialist. So that's remarkable. Socialists are less popular than atheists or Muslims in America. That's insane. Right now, the largest socialist group in America is the Democratic Socialist of America. There's 60,000 members of the Democratic Socialist of America. So Bernie Sanders reassures us that democratic socialism is not slave labor camps, which I heard was going to happen under Obama. He's going to enslave white people. We elect him, he'll just enslave whites. So no, there is no slave labor camps under Obama. There's not going to be any slave labor camps under Bernie. Bernie is specifically saying that this is not what he is. So there, could he be, get into gulags? Could he be an authoritarian? Yeah, anybody could do anything. But because he's sitting there saying that he's opposed to totalitarian Big Brother Iron Curtain overtaking and controlling all of our lives, he's not for the gulags, throwing political prisoners in jail. He's not for farm collectives, which is, essentially slave labor camps, forcing all these poor peasants to raise the food for the rest of society, and then their food is taken from them to give to the rich. Oh, thank you, farmer, for making all this food. Now we're going to take all your food and leave you with nothing. So fuck the farm collectives, fuck the gulags. Bernie Sanders not going to do that. His socialism doesn't include labor camps. It doesn't include dictatorship. He's opposed to authoritarianism and also the free speech. So typically, he doesn't like to use the word socialism during the campaigns because he doesn't want to spend his entire life explaining to dumb fucks what the hell socialism is. No, I'm not for Soviet Union socialism. No, I'm not for the Albanian socialism. I'm not with the socialism that has concentration camps. And I'm not for the socialism that cuts free speech and individual freedoms. So he specifically has said all those things. So, okay, great. Bernie's not going to do gulags, farm collectives, no totalitarianisms, no slave labor camps, no dictatorships, no curbing of our individual rights and freedoms. We're not going to model ourselves on the Soviet Union or the Albanians. We are going to, have our own kind of socialism. We're not going to do the concentration camps, not the slave camps. So that's good to know. Those are all good things to know, Someone was like, he's going to be like Stalin. And I was like, I didn't know what to say in response. I mean, he's a socialist. And then that same person said, well, Adolf was a national socialist. Hitler is right-wing, so to say he's a National Socialist just means, he called himself that, but that just shows you the popularity of socialism, and he used it for his right-wing agenda. So that was just him calling himself like a liberal socialist, getting up there, and then being a fascist right-wing piece of shit. So he pretended to be left, but he was very right-wing. He was authoritarian, fascist. Give me a fucking break. Hitler is right-wing. And anyways, okay, so when it comes to Bernie Sanders' platform, let's look at what he's talking about. He's not talking about a redistribution of wealth program like the universal basic income. He's not talking about Cory Booker's baby bonds. He's not talking about reparations. So what kind of, government is he going to... So not just one that gives checks out to everybody, but he's going to have free health care, free child care, free education, which includes vocation and college, free old age pension, and free disability, and free 12 weeks of work leave. So it seems to me he's for a welfare state. He's for a welfare state. He's for a government that keeps the market economy, but also gives free health care, child care, education, vocation, and college, free old age pension, free disability, which is Social Security, the most popular program in America, in American history, and then free 12 weeks of work or family leave. So if you have a baby, you get 3 months off. If you're sick, you get to take 3 months off of work. And that'll be probably paid for by the government. Social Security paid for, well, not by the government. They took it out of our payroll checks, Social Security, right? So the working class are paying for the old people now. Free education, vocation, and college. So basically services. Just a bunch of government services. We don't get laptops, we don't get computers, we don't get cars. We're just getting a bunch of government services. So that's a welfare state. Is this a collective, the theory of the collective thing, and, the administrative of the means of production for the working class? It's kind of like that. But I think when people think about socialism on a state level, they're talking about nationalization. Is he going to take over all the private industries? Is he going to kill capitalism? Is he going to destroy capitalism once and for all? So Bernie Sanders, he's also pointed to other nations who have models that he agrees with. So again, he's for a welfare state, free health care, college education, and Social Security, work leave, family leave, and child care. So you have Norway. Norway, parents get paid 1 year to take care of their newborn infants. So they get 1 year of family leave. He's talking about only 3 weeks. But this just shows you, the kinds of programs he's in favor of. No to reparations, no to universal basic income, no to baby bonds, but yes for child care. Yes for family leave. Finland and Sweden have national health care, free college, affordable housing, and a higher standard of living. So he's talking about affordable housing, he's talking about free college, he's talking about health care. Again, welfare state, services that the government provides for the general population. In Finland, Norway, and Denmark, poverty has almost been eliminated. Health care is a right as a condition of citizenship. College is available to everybody regardless of income. Virtually free. We need to move towards a sustainable society, increase political participation. So all those things. Being respectful to the environment is part of democratic socialism. Getting more people to come vote is part of democratic socialism. And then also, again, we're seeing free health care, free college as a condition of citizenship. You're an American? Okay, well then you get, to use our hospitals and our colleges. You're not American? Well, you don't get to use our colleges and our hospitals. So, and that helps with poverty, so that helps with a ton of things. And then he says that Germans go to college and the cost is nothing. It's also free for Americans to go to college in Germany too. So, again, free college, free health care, free child care, affordable housing. That's, I don't know if he's going to invest in housing. But services, right? School services, child care, health care, old age pension, disability. So there are some checks being passed out. Social Security. That's the only checks being passed out. The other ones, free 12 weeks of work leave. So I guess there's probably going to be check for that, right? The employer are going to get paid, and then or the employee, you should just give that straight to the employee. So that's going to be a check, right? Work leave, 3 months of family or work leave. So there's a couple checks being cut, right? A little bit of checks with the work leave program. He also believes in a federal jobs program. So if you want to work, you should be able to work. So, federal jobs program, if there's no jobs, what are people supposed to do? In America, if you don't have a job, you die. You work or die in America. So by having a federal jobs program, as long as you're respectful and professional, you should be able to get whatever. If you want to work and there's jobs out there, you should be able to get that job and you should be able to help. That makes, productive society. So guaranteeing a job. So that's guaranteeing a person's, right, or not right, but I guess the person to work to make some money. So to produce and to make and then to get paid for it. We don't want to do a bunch of, bridges to nowhere, but there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done. And so having a federal jobs program, that's, again, services, right? It's essentially just having jobs out there for people to do. And so it's not a check. It's not nationalization. It's not, complete communist control. People are so afraid of, oh, no, Bernie Sanders is going to take over everything, gulags and, the damn slave labor camps and the concentration camps and all the slavery and death and disease and poverty. So if you want to say, oh, they're poor, well, there's Scandinavia, right? Norway, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Germany. These are the countries he's looking at. So when it comes to what is democratic socialism, it's a mixture of a free market economy and socialistic kind of things, but it's government spending. So it's a welfare state. It's more of a welfare state than socialism, because how can you make sure that the government always stays loyal to the working class people? Unless you have a union, unless you have a group of working class citizens that always puts the pressure on the government, then that means it's a, democracy is when the government's afraid of the people. Dictatorship is when the people are afraid of the government. So, okay, well, he wants to put an end to war on drugs. He wants to end war and imperialism. He wants to demilitarize the police. He's anti-authoritarian. So he's anti-authoritarian. That's another reason to not think he's going to be a Stalin. So Bernie Sanders, he's also not a genocidal maniac, and he doesn't want to enslave and hurt people. And so he believes in a federal jobs program, ending the war on drugs, ending imperialism and war, demilitarizing the police. So it's not just about economics, right? All that's part of democratic socialism. What Bernie is made up of, what he has done, his record, the things that he wants to push for in America, ending the war on drugs. What's that mean? That means he believes that we have a right to our own body. So he's left libertarian, right? So Bernie Sanders, democratic socialism isn't just about the welfare state, free college and free health care and child care and family leave, but it's also about being anti-authoritarian and, putting an end to the war on drugs, ending the war, and so much more.